even though it hasn't officially been announced yet, because we've got the Super Bowl in another week, and you can't announce the hiring of a candidate until his team's season is over, which I've always felt is kind of stupid anyways, like not a very modern spin on it. We all know, for all intents and purposes, based off of all reports, as it stands right now, that the Minnesota Vikings, who just recently hired their own first-time general manager, have made their decision on who their new head coach is going to be, and it's going to be a first-time head coach, and it's going to be in the form of Kevin O'Connell, the offensive coordinator of the Los Angeles Rams. To which some of you are going to say, who? Who the fuck is this guy? And I get that. I understand that. And I will tell you, like, this isn't exactly helping the optics of the league right now, in the sense that if it stands as reported, Kevin O'Connell is going to be the 6th head coach hired in this cycle, and all of them basically have the same pigment as me. Meanwhile, you do have other qualified candidates that do not look like me that have been shut out. Now, maybe Leftwich would have ended up with the Jacksonville job if he didn't pull himself out of consideration, so that could have been one. But like I said, if anything, I respect the professionalism and sophistication of Byron Leftwich, the professional maturity to say, yeah, I want a job, but I don't want that job, and I don't need it in my life. I don't want it in my life. That could be a hard thing to do. You allow your desperation for a top job guide you down the wrong path. But still, the optics here are not the best. And you're going to have a lot of people crying about this Kevin O'Connell hire, talking about how it's another good old boys hire. It's another unqualified white coach getting an opportunity. And, you know, there are layers and complexities to this conversation. First of all, does that mean the Minnesota Vikings general manager, who is a black man, at least last time I checked, all reports talk about Cam is he's not a gringo. Is he racist because he's going to hire a white head coach? Like, it's interesting in recent years that the NFL has done a better job of diversifying their front offices, their scouting departments, and coaching staffs and head coaching jobs in particular certainly have not followed suit. They have not kept up with the pace of change. That's absolutely true. Just like not every head coaching opportunity should automatically go to a white guy, same thing would be true. Not every head coaching opportunity should go to a black candidate just because they're black. And nobody's saying I don't think that they should. My point I'm getting at here is that when people are going to cry about this, it's like, let's look at the proper context here. Are we saying that Cam is racist? Does that mean that you're saying then that Brad Holmes was racist last year when he hired Dan Campbell, a white guy on the offensive side? I talked about this in my recent video about Brian Flores and that whole lawsuit. Talked about just how deep-seated the problems are. This is shit that goes back generations and unfortunately is going to take decades to fix. When people talk about there is a quantity, a glut of qualified black head coaching candidates, I don't fundamentally disagree with that at all because that is true. However, many of those top candidates are on the defensive side of the ball at a time that the league is shifting more and more towards an offensive approach, which means they are targeting more frequently offensive-minded head coach. You have 3 times the amount of black defensive coordinators in the National Football League as you do offensive coordinators. So it is one problem begets another, begets another, begets another. So the black general manager of the Minnesota Vikings appears to be hiring another young, white, promising, white hope type of head coach. And that is going to have people feeling some type of way. Because isolated in its own bubble, it maybe doesn't look as bad. But as part of the larger narrative, the larger picture of this NFL head coaching offseason cycle, it don't look good. And we have to acknowledge the optics here are really, really bad as a whole. Again, does that mean that the black general manager is racist, or the black general manager hired the person that he felt was ultimately most qualified for the job and went with the second choice after they ultimately didn't land a deal with Jim Harbaugh? Like, if the Vikings were hiring Jim Harbaugh, would we really have these same gripes? I don't think so. At least we shouldn't. He would have easily been one of the most qualified candidates in the head coaching cycle. He was. Now, as far as the Kevin O'Connell piece, like, this is a name that's going to make people go, huh? And this is a name I've been paying attention to for a few years, back to when he was in Washington. as an offensive coordinator in 2019, and even before that, on the staff. Like I envisioned in a couple of years, Kevin O'Connell was going to be a name we heard about, and that Kevin O'Connell was eventually going to be a head coach in the NFL, and probably before the age of 40. It's just a matter of getting in the right spot, getting the right opportunity. And that's what he did, and that's what he got, being the offensive coordinator of the Los Angeles Rams for the past 2 seasons, and now you're talking about a Rams team that is 1 win away from the Super Bowl. It stands to reason, it's tradition, that a lot of the assistants associated with these Super Bowl teams tend to get those head coaching opportunities. And you're going to say, well, what's the big deal about Kevin O'Connell? Yeah, he's the offensive coordinator in Los Angeles, but he's not even the play caller. Okay, fair enough. Like, that's not unfair in terms of a criticism if you want to call that out. But you also have to understand the bigger play here. Is that the Shanahan-McVay kind of coaching tree that we're talking about with the NFL has a lot of appeal and has produced some success in recent years. So we always talk about the NFL being a copycat kind of league. It's kind of copycatting that. We joke sometimes about basically if you ever farted or sneezed in Sean McVay or Kyle Shanahan's general direction, you're going to get a head coaching job. But there is something to that. Look at the damn Super Bowl. Who's the coach of the Cincinnati Bengals? Zach Taylor. And he was one of those guys you looked at a couple of years ago and said, there's no fucking way this guy is qualified. There's no fucking way that this guy is ready. He wasn't even the damn offensive coordinator with the Rams. He was McVay's quarterback's coach. And now, 3 seasons later, after getting the job, he's in the damn Super Bowl. And he's helping Joe Burrow develop into potentially an elite quarterback in the league. So much for me calling Burrow mid. Look at another guy, Matt LaFleur. Spent a year as the offensive coordinator with the Rams in 2017. Went to Tennessee in 2018 because he wanted to actually have the play calling duties. And spent the last 3 years in Green Bay as the head coach. And they've made a couple of NFC championship games. And had some epic playoff chokes. But the point being is Rodgers has won a couple of MVPs, or he's in position to win the other back-to-back MVPs under LaFleur's leadership and guidance and coaching. So it stands to reason, like, some teams will start to look at it and say, holy shit, there might be something there. Maybe there's something to Kyle Shanahan and Sean McVay. Surround themselves with talented coaches that have high potential, that are able to grow and develop in their role and expand their scope and get themselves ready to be head coaches in the National Football League. Like, if you're looking for a place where you say, in this world of uncertainty, I can find some type of certainty, the McVay coaching tree right now ain't a bad one. Brandon Staley, Zach Taylor, Matt LaFleur. It makes sense. And Kevin O'Connell is another member of that coaching tree. He's another one of the McVay disciples. And LaFleur's been successful. Certainly with an upgrade and improvement over Mike McCarthy, right? Right? Zach Taylor. I mean, Marvin Lewis can never win a playoff game in Cincinnati. Here comes Zach Taylor, and in 3 years, he's got the Bengals in the damn Super Bowl. So when you talk about a new first-time general manager and looking for some type of certainty or some type of pattern that they can point to, even from an analytical standpoint, say there's got to be some smoke here, there's got to be some fire, it's going and dipping into that McVay coaching tree. And makes sense that you want somebody that's counterculture to Mike Zimmer, who is an old, crusty defensive guy, so you want to go with the young, bright offensive guy. And bright, not just in mind. Now, do I think that Byron Leftwich is more fundamentally qualified than a Kevin O'Connell? Absolutely. Do I think Jim Caldwell is more fundamentally qualified? Oh, God, yes. It's not even a conversation. Do I think guys like Todd Bowles and Leslie Frazier are getting the short end of the stick here? Abso-fucking-lutely. If Kevin O'Connell has questions about his play calling in Los Angeles and the fact that he doesn't call plays, then what does that mean for an Eric Bieniemy, where you hear different conflicting reports about whether or not he's truly the play caller in Kansas City, but you know ultimately that he is to some degree. But he can't get an opportunity. Now, there are other complications there with Bieniemy, but like, when you look at some of these other candidates, I'm not going to sit here and pretend like Kevin O'Connell is the best prepared or the most qualified, because he just isn't. This is much a gamble, and perhaps an understandable gamble based off of some of the context I'm providing here, about why a team like the Vikings would pursue him. They're kind of stuck with Kirk Cousins, so they want to get the most out of him. They want to get the most out of Justin Jefferson. They want to make sure they get the most out of Dalvin Cook when he's in his peak. They know that there's work to do in rebuilding that defense, so they could potentially invest less in that offense by having a guy like O'Connell in the fold. I get that. And when you look at the recent success of guys like LaFleur and Taylor, like until these McVay disciples, Staley, so forth, like until these McVay disciples start failing in the NFL, these guys are going to continue to get NFL head coaching jobs. Sean McVay is going to be able to attract the best possible candidates, the ones with the most upside. Now, I wish that would mean he would diversify his staff a little bit more and help create some opportunities that way. That would be great. And maybe that's coming, but maybe it's not. I don't know. But the fact is, for those that are going to criticize this Kevin O'Connell hire, I would agree. He's not the most qualified. Just like Matt LaFleur was not maybe the most qualified. Zach Taylor certainly wasn't the most qualified. Sometimes, unfortunately, qualifications alone are not what you're entirely hiring somebody on. And all of these are a gamble. Do I think if Kevin O'Connell should have a head coaching job, that a guy like Byron Leftwich and Eric Bieniemy should? Oh, abso-fucking-lutely. But we got to be careful throwing out the racist label specifically for this Minnesota hire. Look at the general manager that ultimately made the call. Not to mention the fact of there is context. And so often we want to make these issues part of the pun here, but we want to make them so clear-cut black and white. And so much about our world is not so much clear-cut black and white. There's a lot of context. There is a lot of nebulous there. There is a lot of gray area. Kevin O'Connell was not the most qualified guy. I agree. Kevin O'Connell is also somebody that I personally have had my eyes on for a couple of years because I knew probably before he turned 40 he would have a head coaching job in the NFL, and he does. And I also know that there might be something to these guys going to work under Sean McVay for a couple of years and they come out and they do well as head coaches of their own teams. And probably something to that. I am curious how Vikings fans feel about this, especially with the disappointment of, in theory, not getting their top target at general manager Ryan Poles. He ended up in Chicago. Not getting their top target as head coach Jim Harbaugh. Like, how do you feel about the hiring of Cam? How do you feel about the hiring of Kevin O'Connell? If I was a Vikings fan, I'd be like, I get it. Wouldn't have been my choice. But there's also a chance that I'll be dead ass wrong in 3 years. I mean, if you look at the situation in the NFC North right now, if you can get good performances out of Cousins and Jefferson and Cook, the Minnesota Vikings can absolutely win this division in 2022. And Kevin O'Connell is probably well-positioned, well-suited to get them to that spot. I just wish that the opportunities that are coming by association for guys like Kevin O'Connell would eventually come for the guys like the Byron Leftwiches, the Eric Bieniemys, the Pep Hamiltons, the Marcus Brady's, and so forth.